The death of late actress Hayden Panettiere has left so many people in a state of shock and mourning as investigators continue to piece together what exactly happened. And now, a renewed spotlight shines on Panettiere's boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, with jaw-dropping new details about their seemingly tumultuous relationship leading up to the very day that Hayden Panettiere died, including first-hand accounts from neighbors and even the late actress's own mom, as she addresses the public for the first time.
Hayden Panettiere is dead. She was 36 years old. More than a week after she was found unresponsive inside a rented Airbnb in Greenville, South Carolina, investigators still don't have all the answers. A police report lists 9 medications reportedly found in a bag of medication she was taking, with the names redacted. Narcan, used to reverse opioid overdoses, was found on scene. Her on- and off-boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, was there when she was discovered. And her mother has since come forward with pointed questions about the hours before her daughter's death. No charges have been filed. No official cause of death has been released. The toxicology results that could answer most of these questions are still pending and could take weeks or months. Here's what's actually known and what investigators are still trying to find out.
So, according to a report from TMZ, Hayden and 37-year-old Brian Hickerson traveled to Greenville, South Carolina together on August 15th, and that is where they rented an Airbnb. Now, his brother is named Zach, and he was staying in his own Airbnb in the Greenville area. So then we go to August 16th. So a day after they arrive in South Carolina, Zach told TMZ that he was trying to get into Brian and Hayden's Airbnb after returning from church, since they reportedly had plans to go get lunch and play some indoor golf after church. He then told the publication, quote, "I knocked loudly," which apparently woke Brian up from a nap they were both taking on the pull-out couch bed in the living room. When we went in and tried to wake Hayden up for lunch, we realized she was unconscious, end quote. Zach reportedly called 911, and at around 1:51 p.m., he tells police that Hayden was unresponsive and in cardiac arrest, with dispatch audio released in the case indicating that it was an apparent, quote, overdose. But still, at this point, there's been no official cause of death released for Hayden Panettiere. Now, at the same time that Zach was calling 911, Brian, the boyfriend, was allegedly administering Narcan on the actress. That's that nasal medication that can be used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. Zach told TMZ that the brothers performed CPR on Hayden while on speaker with 911 as they waited for fire and EMS to arrive. 7 minutes later, first responders arrive on scene and they begin life-saving measures, but tragically, Hayden Panettiere was pronounced dead on scene at 2:32 in the afternoon.
According to TMZ, Hayden and 37-year-old Brian Hickerson traveled to Greenville, South Carolina, on August 15th and rented an Airbnb. Brian's brother, Zach, was staying nearby. The next day, Zach returned from church and tried to get into the Airbnb for a planned lunch. He said he knocked loudly, waking Brian, who'd been napping with Hayden on a pull-out couch. When they tried to wake Hayden, she was unconscious. Zach called 911 around 1:51 p.m., reporting Hayden unresponsive and in cardiac arrest. Dispatch audio reportedly described it as an apparent overdose. Though no cause of death has been confirmed, Brian administered Narcan while the brothers performed CPR on speaker with 911. First responders arrived 7 minutes later. Hayden was pronounced dead at 2:32 p.m.
Now, according to a police report that was cited by CNN, an officer on scene interviewed the brothers, who said that they called 911. The officer reportedly spoke with Zach Hickerson first, who advised that Hayden was his brother's girlfriend. Page 6 also cites from the report that Brian then handed law enforcement a, quote, bag of medication that Hayden was taking at the time of her death, though the names of the medications were redacted. But there were 9 different medications reportedly listed. Now, Narcan was also reportedly found on scene when first responders arrived. The police report also notes that Zach was, quote, very emotional while medical personnel were working on reviving Hayden, but Brian did not become visibly emotional until Hayden Panettiere was declared dead. Now, police said that the preliminary investigation did not indicate any sign of foul play or suspicious circumstances, nor did the initial autopsy find signs of physical trauma or foul play. But As we mentioned earlier, this investigation remains active through the Greenville City Police Department alongside the DEA to determine if there is any sort of criminal conduct.
A police report cited by CNN adds detail. Zach was described as very emotional as paramedics worked on Hayden. Brian, according to the report, didn't become visibly emotional until she was declared dead. Brian reportedly handed officers a bag of medication, 9 medications listed, names redacted. Narcan was also found on scene. Police said the preliminary investigation showed no signs of foul play, and the initial autopsy found no physical trauma. But the case remains open, led by Greenville Police with the DEA now assisting. The toxicology report could answer more than anything else in this case, and it hasn't come back. It could show what was in Hayden's system, whether medication levels were normal or toxic, whether alcohol was involved, and whether anything beyond her 9 listed medications was present. Until then, this remains officially an open investigation, not a determined cause of death. Understanding why investigators are scrutinizing Brian's account requires understanding the relationship's documented history, much of which Hayden wrote about herself.
Now, Panettiere had accused Hickerson of domestic abuse, particularly in her memoir, just a few months ago. She wrote, quote, "What I never told them was that the abuse I'd endured didn't feel as bad as the thought of being alone," end quote. The New York Times is reporting that back in March, Panettiere had reportedly hired security to keep Hickerson away. This is the same person she was found with on the day that she died. Court documents reveal that he was sentenced to 45 days in jail in April 2021 after pleading no contest to 2 felony domestic violence charges for injuring Panettiere. That sentence also came with a 5-year protection order, which expired this past April. Hickerson even came out and apologized after the memoir was released, saying it was true that he was in a dark place that included substance issues, and that it was a, quote, "terrible thing I did to her," end quote. The New York Times reports back in August 2022, Hickerson was found in violation of his probation conditions after he and Panettiere were filmed in a brawl with other people outside the Sunset Marquis Hotel in West Hollywood, and he had to complete a year-long domestic violence treatment program, attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and complete dozens of anger management sessions. This is all according to court records. He even tried to get the court to reduce his felony convictions to misdemeanors in 2025, but that was unsuccessful, with another attempt to do so as recently as this month, according to court records.
In her memoir, released months before her death, she described enduring abuse, writing that it didn't feel as bad as the thought of being alone. Court documents show Hickerson pleaded no contest to 2 felony domestic violence charges for injuring her, and was sentenced to 45 days in jail in 2021, along with a 5-year protective order that expired this past April. He later apologized publicly, calling it a terrible thing I did to her. Records show a 2022 probation violation after a filmed altercation outside a West Hollywood hotel, leading to a year of domestic violence treatment, AA meetings, and anger management. He unsuccessfully petitioned twice, most recently this month, to reduce his felony convictions to misdemeanors. That is his documented past. It is separate from what happened on August 16th. No criminal charges have been filed against him regarding Hayden's death, and he hasn't been accused of any crime connected to it. His attorney says the investigation should proceed, and police confirmed no signs of foul play.
They left after about 10 minutes, though it has not been confirmed if the visit was connected to the investigation. Now remember, further toxicology and testing is also pending to find out what was in Hayden Panettiere's system at the time that she died, and that could take anywhere from weeks to even months. Now, in a statement on Thursday, lawyers for Brian Hickerson said, quote, "Hayden's death remains under investigation, and it is important to allow that investigation to proceed as has been publicly reported. Police confirmed there were no signs of foul play," end quote.
Hayden's mother, Lesley Vogel, has spoken publicly.
And now we are hearing from Panettiere's mom. This woman's name is Lesley Vogel, and she's also revealing her own details about the couple's relationship from her point of view. So last week, Vogel told NBC News in part, quote, "This person in her life that we have been trying to get rid of for quite some time was with her at her death, and that was Brian Hickerson. I think Hayden was an amazingly talented person in so many departments, and I think young people who grow up in the entertainment industry, it is a struggle, and it's a very challenging industry, and it's not unusual for them to sadly find the wrong path. I think it becomes very difficult to be true to yourself, and I think Hayden sadly lost her way, and I wish it were different. I wish she had stayed true to herself because she had so many incredible attributes, end quote. Now, Vogel pushed back on criticism for that statement in an interview on Good Morning America this week. Remember, this was a mom talking about her daughter, even though they did not have a very close relationship at the time of Hayden's death. But this is what Vogel told GMA, quote, "I would say to the haters out there, you don't have a right to tell me how I mourn the loss of my second child. That's my domain."
She told NBC News that Hickerson was someone she'd been trying to keep out of her daughter's life.
Vogel told Good Morning America that Panettiere and Hickerson grew closer in 2018 after she ceded full custody of her daughter to her ex-fiancé, longtime heavyweight boxing champ Vladimir Klitschko, following Panettiere's struggles with postpartum depression, which spiraled into a dependence on alcohol and opioids. Vogel said, quote, "I think she struggled, and Brian came into her life. She was vulnerable." She told the Daily Mail in a separate interview published this weekend that the relationship became deeply codependent as drugs allegedly became a part of their lives. Now, in a New York Times interview, Hayden's mom said she became alarmed that Brian Hickerson, who reportedly filed for bankruptcy in 2022, had pawned some of Panettiere's belongings, including a vintage guitar. The New York Times also said they independently verified this information through their own source.
She told the New York Times she became alarmed after learning Hickerson, who reportedly filed for bankruptcy in 2022, had pawned some of Hayden's belongings, including a vintage guitar, a claim the Times says it independently verified.
Vogel also told the New York Times that Panettiere herself appeared shocked when she found out that some of her belongings were in Hickerson's storage unit. Vogel said that her and Hayden would eventually have a falling out in part over her attempt to keep Hickerson out of her daughter's life and finances. And at the time of Panettiere's death, the New York Times says that Panettiere and her mom had been estranged for months. Vogel told the New York Times, quote, "She was courageous, she was a fighter, but deep down inside, I think Hayden was extremely vulnerable." Vogel also told ABC News in part, quote, "She knew that Brian was toxic. She knew she had to get him out of her life."
Vogel said. Hayden herself seemed shocked to learn this. The two had reportedly become estranged in the months before Hayden's death, partly over Vogel's attempts to keep Hickerson away from her daughter's life and finances. In an interview with the Daily Mail, Vogel said she found Brian's account of the timeline full of holes.
Now, in an interview that Vogel did with the Daily Mail, she also had this interview published over the weekend. Vogel claimed that she spoke with a police officer at the scene of Hayden Panettiere's death, and she asked if there would be a further investigation. And Vogel claims the officer brought up Brian Hickerson's name, and Vogel allegedly told the officer she thought that he would be culpable. Now, again, no charges have been filed in this case, and Brian Hickerson has not been accused of any wrongdoing. Vogel also told the Daily Mail that she found Brian's timeline of events to be, quote, "full of holes," including when he allegedly found Panettiere unresponsive. Now, Vogel said, quote, "I don't know how you can take a nap near someone who is dying and not realize something's wrong. How do you do that?" Now, we will continue to emphasize that no one has been criminally implicated in Hayden Panettiere's death. Brian has not been accused of any crime related to the incident, and of course, it's up to law enforcement to make a final determination.
She also explained that he was napping near Hayden when she stopped responding. "I don't know how you can take a nap near someone who is dying and not realize something's wrong," she said. These are her statements and interpretations, not confirmed findings.
We are getting a glimpse at just how bad some of these alleged domestic violence incidents were. Mia Terrazas, a neighbor of Hayden Panettiere in West Hollywood, California, told Page Six in an interview that she saw Hayden with visible, bright red spots and bruises being taken out of her Los Angeles apartment in a gurney. on 2 different occasions in 2023 and 2024. So you're seeing these accusations build up year in and year out. Terrazas told Page Six, quote, "It appeared that she had been beaten up. It wasn't apparent to me that it could have been anything else," end quote, adding that Hayden Panettiere allegedly often looked, quote, battered. According to TMZ, Panettiere's HOA also hung up warning posters back in 2025 with Hickerson's face urging people to call 911 immediately to report that he is trespassing on the premises. That neighbor also told Page Six that she called police several times to report Hickerson at Panettiere's home, though, according to her, Brian allegedly kept.
Well, first we have to remember one thing, and I'm going to make a statement here that we can actually apply to so many of the high profile cases happening right now. And an investigation is not an accusation, right? Investigation is necessary, and sometimes it eliminates all of these possibilities that we're looking at. And here we have a very complicated history. We have a young, talented, dynamic star who had been struggling with various issues by her own admission. She was struggling with addiction with both alcohol and substance. We know by her own admission in police records there was domestic violence in this relationship. In all likelihood, we're looking at coercive control between her and Brian, this on again, off again relationship. We see her stepping forward in May. And May is an interesting point. If I'm taking a look at the victimology here of Hayden as I'm going back, and that's one of the things that investigators will do, is I'm going to look at this May time period pretty closely here, because in May, she had come out, she's talking about all of these challenges that many of us wouldn't have the intestinal fortitude to admit about our lives, where our lives had taken this wrong turn or a sad turn. And here she is being strong and admitting these things, talking about a contentious, difficult, challenging relationship with her mother, with these addiction issues, with domestic violence. And even reporting shows that she had her security detail, or someone had the security detail, instructed to keep Brian away from her while she's on this book tour. Days before Hayden died, we know that there was a hearing where Brian's sobriety was brought up and questioned at this hearing. And then just a matter of days later, when she goes from people keeping Brian away from her, here she is traveling with him across the country, and then she's dead.
Reporting indicated that Hayden's security detail had been instructed to keep Hickerson away during her book tour, and that his sobriety was reportedly questioned at a hearing just days before her death, before the two ended up traveling together. Miller said investigators would compare Brian's account to surveillance video known to exist from the property, and would examine the 9 redacted medications closely who prescribed them, whether pill counts and containers matched, and whether testing was needed.
Yeah, the medications is interesting. She, again, by her own admission, postpartum depression, is something that she struggled with. I mean, you just think of the trauma of being in multiple relationships where there were accusations of domestic violence, not just with, her current boyfriend, but, she talked about it in relationships in the past. And then you have addiction issues. She also, though, relatively young person, 9 medications she was prescribed. We don't know what those are. Those were redacted in the police report, but right. Just that number, from a law enforcement standpoint, what does that tell you?
Well, I'm looking in that, and we know from reporting that she was having some health-related issues, and I think her mother had even commented about health-related issues that maybe are caused by some of her other addiction issues. I think there was an accident in one of the filmings that she did that had caused her some pain. I want to look specifically at what she was prescribed. Once the toxicology comes in, I want to see if everything matches up. But while I'm waiting, I'm looking at the pills, and I'm looking at who prescribed them, what pills were in the containers. Are the pills correct? I mean, are they the pills that are supposed to be in the pill containers? Because a lot of people mix those around. We can't just look at the bottle and say for sure what's inside. If I have any question about whether those pills are actual um, copycat pills, I'm going to have those pills tested. I'll ask the DA to assist with that. I'm counting how many there were, how many she should have had. And I'm going to look for evidence of like cleanup at the apartment. I'm going to look for evidence that maybe somebody else was supplying her other things while I'm waiting for this toxicology to come in.
They'd also look for signs of cleanup and for evidence that anyone else was supplying Hayden with additional substances, including checking encrypted apps like Telegram, Signal, and WhatsApp, and financial records, since acquiring drugs typically involves money changing hands.
Well, the criminality I'm looking at is the Matthew Perry investigation is a very good one to take a look at. We have doctors that were overprescribing, the lure of money and making extra money, maybe the inability to say no. I am looking to see who was enabling her, who was providing her. I'm looking at apps like Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp to see what secret, maybe illicit messaging was going on. Who's providing her what? It becomes criminal when you go beyond a doctor's prescription, right? And you have those in her circle, maybe somebody that was trying to exert some type of control over her, supplying her, feeding her needs to make her more dependent on them. That's one of the things that we have to look at. Brian, and the history of domestic violence in this case doesn't mean guilt, but it's something that we have to look at very, very closely and very tightly just to see what pressure he may have been applying.
Miller cautioned that Narcan's presence isn't automatically suspicious. Hayden had spoken publicly about past opioid struggles, and keeping Narcan on hand is a responsible precaution, not evidence of wrongdoing on its own.
What do you make of Narcan already being in the home? And that's, for people who deal with addiction, that is a invaluable tool that can be
Right.
used to, bring someone back to life without a doubt. But the fact that it was already in the house, what does that tell you as a member of law enforcement?
Well, there's going to be hard questions I'll be asking, but frankly, we know through Hayden's own words that she had used and abused opioids. So her having Narcan with her, frankly, it's a legitimate responsibility to carry that when you're struggling with something like that. So while law enforcement should be asking the hard questions, that's not necessarily coming from a place of judgment. It is a good, responsible decision to have that particular tool with you.
Investigators will still want to understand the role Narcan played, and how that fits once toxicology returns. The DEA is assisting the investigation, but authorities have not publicly explained exactly why the agency became involved. Once toxicology identifies what was in Hayden's system, investigators may try to trace where any substances came from, a legitimate prescription or somewhere else.
So, we often hear okay, results come back, and we often hear about, the results themselves. But as, for you, if you were the detective on this, the toxicology result for Hayden Panettiere comes back, what are you looking at? What actually does that specifically tell you in that document when you get it from a medical examiner?
Well, it's going to tell me the levels of what she had. Did she have therapeutic levels of what she was prescribed? Did she have other things on board besides what she was prescribed? Did she have high level of alcohol in her system also? It's going to tell me, did she have toxic levels of whatever, more than what she should have been taken, that actually led to her death? Once I know what she had on board in her body when she passed away, then police investigators, probably in combination with the DEA in this case, because we don't know, did they bring these drugs or whatever these drugs were from California to South Carolina? They're going to start tracing from Hayden's body to the source, find out where whatever she has in her system, where that came from. And that's where the digital evidence right now is especially important when I talk about these apps that people use. That digital trace, was anything erased? That's consciousness of guilt if messaging is disappearing. But we're also looking at, like I said, the Telegram app, Signal app, WhatsApp, to see what kind of communications happen. Is there financial transactions? I want to start digging into the finances of it because you don't get these drugs for free. Are they providing money to a source somewhere? So I start tracking back once I know exactly what she had in her.
Using digital communications and financial records as part of that trail. None of this confirms illegal drugs were involved. It reflects investigative questions that remain open. More remains unknown. What was actually in Hayden's system? Were her 9 medications taken as prescribed? Was alcohol involved? What does surveillance actually show? What do digital communications reveal? And was anything deleted? If unidentified substances are found, where did they come from? These are the questions Greenville Police and the DEA are working to answer. The toxicology report will shape what comes next. And the broader investigation will determine whether investigators uncover any evidence of criminal conduct. No one has been accused of a crime. What's confirmed is that a family is grieving. A mother is asking hard public questions. And a federal, assisted investigation is still trying to piece together what happened to Hayden Panettiere. The official cause and manner of death remain pending, with toxicology and further testing still needed. Until those results come back, that's the only honest answer anyone can give.